Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Kenston Bomber Stadium here for high school football on WKYC.com. It's our game of the week for week number 2 as the Kenston Bombers play host to the Chagrin Falls Tigers. I'm Dave DeNatale, and I have entered D-Man's world tonight. Dennis Manoloff from News Radio WTAM 1100 is my partner for tonight. He'll be with me on a number of Fridays here during this season, and D-Man, it's good to have you with us.
This is Dino's world, not D-Man's world. But it's an honor to be here. My first trip to Kenston. It's palatial. It's a beautiful campus. Really, it almost has a college feel to it.
It does, and the Kenston Bombers are coming off of a state championship. They are the defending Division III state champions. You kind of feel that all around you as you walk in until you see this team on the field. And you talk to Coach Jeff Rubich and you talk to the players and you have kind of an idea of what their mindset is. They all say, hey, look, it was great last year. It was a wonderful experience, but we're on to this year. And the goal and the mission to this year, they want to run the table and be undefeated and then defend their championship in the playoffs.
Yeah, Dino, they certainly got off to a statement-type start in Black River. And, I've heard a lot of Kenston Bombers, and I'm really not a high school aficionado like you are, but I've heard a lot about Kenston regardless. And so I've heard about some of their stars, and I can't wait to watch. But at the same time, Chagrin Falls has the potential to be a influencer.
Yeah, let's talk about Chagrin Falls. Mark Imarino's program got out to a good start early last week in week 1 at Streetsboro. They got a couple of quick touchdowns from Xavier Perez, won a 95-yard kickoff return. He also had a touchdown.
Crazies, you guys ready to start bouncing?
It was a competitive game at halftime, and then all of a sudden,
ready to start bouncing, crazies?
All Streetsboro, and they ran for 543 yards against Falls last week. And with Jack Porter, the Upstate running back for Kenston, waiting in the wings this week, Coach Imarino and his defense have got to get things shored up here for Chagrin Falls if they're going to have an opportunity to stay in this game, this backyard rivalry.
Yeah, and what you understand is that Kenston can throw and pass, so they obviously know what happened to Chagrin Falls last week, and Chagrin Falls yesterday. So you wonder what they're going to do, how they're going to choose to attack, but it's a tall order for Chagrin Falls to come in here in a road game against a team that looks like a mini professional high school team. You watch
complete with the star at the 50 yard line.
I mean, it's like the Dallas Cowboys training facility. They've got the Cowboys colors and the Cowboys star, and I've watched them several hours before the game, going through the book. Not that other teams don't, they all do, but these guys look, they look real and dangerous. So it's going to be a tough ask for
Kenston, on the other hand, they came in with a couple of all-state players. We mentioned Jack Porter, the all-state running back last year for the Bombers. He ran for 115 yards and scored 32 touchdowns. He had 3 of those in the state championship game against Kettering also. John Tupsick is the quarterback. He's back for another year, and all Tom Tupsick did last year was throw for 3,000 yards and 27 touchdowns. Only 4 interceptions, guys, and that's for me, that's the mark of a quarterback that makes good decisions. He actually threw an interception last week, which as I was crunching the numbers on, amazingly, but John makes good decisions. He understands how to hide in his Jeff Rubich offense. And if you were watching Thursday Night Football last night, it was Sunday Night Football, but you watched Rich Trubisky and the Bears. Well, once upon a time, Rich Trubisky ran the offense for Jeff Rubich. He was slinging it for a long day. Get ready to roll here. Yeah, and I think that's a good move for Coach Imarino. He wants to but there are a couple of targets that watch for us. You mentioned Perez. The other guy I think we're going to need tonight is Gazunas. He does pretty much help us out with 3 catches.
The Monarchs are coached by Jeff Burbidge, assisted by Scott Anderson, Reed Cornell, Martin Kucha, Curtis Gabriel, Thomas Grenier, Steve Rubin, Bob Halen, Mike Henry, Fred Lachenauer, Mike Obranovich, Corey Payne, Bob Ross, Wallace Sonny, and Steve Ringo. The Bombers entered tonight's contest with a 1-0 record with a 35-0 drubbing of Black River last week. And the Tigers entered this contest with an 0-1 record.
Get rolling here. About a minute or two before kickoff. This was our game of the week voted on by youth fans. Outvoting Kirtland and Riverside. Painesville, but that'll be one we'll follow tonight. We'll let you know what happens there. Also outvoted a West Side game that I was intrigued by. Rocky River hosting Valley Forge, a couple of teams that had playoff aspirations in the past. So I'm real curious to see how some of those games kind of play themselves out tonight. But,
River not very far from me. This is a far drive, but you know what? Once I got here, I was like, wow, this place is beautiful. It truly is. It's a campus type setting.
It's worth the drive when you come out. Trust us. It really, really is. Blake Torres will kick it off for the Bombers. And back deep for Chagrin Falls. Will Richmond, Xavier Perez. Monday up on the near side here. Perfect night right now. Matt Wentz told me last night that there was the possibility that we may have a sprinkle at some point this evening. First home game since the state championship win for the Bombers. Trying to start the 2019 home season with a win, and we are off and running tonight. Forrest's kick will be fielded by Perez at the 2-yard line. Out to the 10. Kind of shooting dive at the 15-yard line, and then backs off to the 9-11. And not able to get anything going. Can't stop that.
You know, I'm also one of my calls. I thought they would kick away from the X-Men. They kicked right to him. I knew where he was, and they kicked to him. They swung the coverage. Favored to do.
Ball at the 12-yard line, so that's where the Tigers will start first and 10. Dawson Pierce, the quarterback. Drew Zimmer's the H-back. Gazunas, Perez, Richmond are the wide receivers. Owen McClintock is the starting running back. So we'll see a lot of Cam O'Connor in the backfield as well. Out of the pistol. First and 10, 2 receivers right, 1 to the left. Pierce on the long count. Turns, throws, pass caught, and then the ball came loose and it instantly passed at the 16-yard line. It was Perez who made the catch, tried to turn upfield, and then lost the handle at the last second. Alex Kalenic, the linebacker, was over there on the coverage, but very, very close to being a fumble.
Correct call. No football move. Unable to make the football move. Ball was out.
Second down and 10. Second down, Clintock will stand for the left of Pierce. This time they'll go 2 receivers on the near side, 1 out wide right. Motion goes Perez. Second and 10 for the Tigers. Staying their way here at Kenston Bomber Stadium. Pierce will throw. Being blitzed back at the 5-yard line, and he'll be put down at the 5-yard line. Matt Steck, the returning starter from last year, came in untouched and records the sack his first of the season.
That's out of a 3-4. That's a basic check, just beating his man right off the ball.
Third and 17.
Third down.
Check's man in that case was a center. Like center guard.
From the 5, it's third down and 10. This time they'll just keep it here. Perez will go, I believe that's O'Connor, out to the 7-yard line. And that's it. Actually, it was McClintock who got carried just a gain of 2. But on that third down and 17, there's not much you can do. Just try to get some room. And it's going to be a punting situation and early field position coming to the way of the Bombers.
I don't want to call this a nightmare start, but this is obviously not what Chagrin Falls wanted. Didn't get much of a kick return, and then nothing happened on the first down. And a short punt.
And a short punt. And here comes Middleton at the 30-yard line. Runs to his left to the 35. Middleton out of bounds at the 30-yard line. Middleton in great field position here for the Bombers. First and 10. Ball will be spotted right at the Chagrin Falls 30-yard line.
First and 10 at the 31-yard line.
Last thing we know is Chagrin Falls wants to do is a short field to this offense.
So John Tom Kupsik, we'll get our first look at him as he is set to go first and 10 at the 31-yard line. Jack Porter stands to his right. And Porter will get the carry. Porter, stutter step inside the 25. Nice second there to get out to the 23-yard line.
Gain of 8.
Pitchcock made the tackle. It's a gain of close to 7. We'll call it 8 for Porter on first down.
Kept the center of gravity low and was able to bounce off the first hit.
Second and just about 2. Porter will shift now to the left of John Tom Kupsik. He wants to throw in the quick drop. Mintz with catch at the 20. Tyler Mintz to the 19. Breaks the tackle. Got a block at the 10. Inside the 5-yard line. They first and goal. Lucas Kazuris made the touchdown saving tackle for the first and goal.
Devon Middleton with a block that will show up on coach's tape to spring him for additional yards.
Something these wide receivers do so well. They block for each other down the field, and they block for Jack Porter out of the backfield. Tom Kupsik, first and goal from the 5. Jack Porter to his left. Here comes Middleton in motion. Give it to him on the jet sweep. Middleton runs left to the 2, to the 1, upended into the end zone. And Jay Middleton takes it in for the touchdown. That was a 41-yard drive that took 3 plays and was an absolute clinic of Kenston Bomber football. 6-0 Kenston with 9:48 to go in this opening first quarter.
Kenston did work on it there. Whatever it felt like makes the run and pass.
A Jack Porter run, a throw to Tyler Mintz, and a Middleton jet sweep after he makes the great block, as you mentioned on the play before. Jeff Grubich rewards him with a touchdown. Here's Blake Torres for the extra point. He was 5 out of 5 last week. Torres to make it 7-0 with 9:48 to go in this opening quarter. A terrific start for the Bombers. They won last week in Black River 35-0. And
Football thanks to following your restaurants.
That's you wonder sometimes if coaching staff, specifically the OC, does see a lot of Middleton in certain sessions. It's getting the ball. I'm sure part of the game plan, obviously, maybe it's just like
Saturday, February 29th, 2020 at the Broken Man's.
Middleton, I think that's his first carry of the season, but he did that last year, and you know, they run those jet sweeps a lot. Mintz and Middleton, just again, as a way to keep the defense honest. You know, everybody get a key out, go out, you know, you can swing around with these wide receivers. They're so good at running with the football, and you give them open kind of steam.
Cleveland Original said, I can't wait to watch what Kenston has on offense because I've heard so much about it. Quick something just scratched the surface. Probably something
So Torres will kick it off. Perez and Richmond back deep to receive. 7-0 Bombers to the touchdown run from Jay Middleton. Football. This one's going to go out of the end zone for a touchdown. So.
Touchback on the play. It'll be first and 10. Forest wins from their own 20-yard
It's a
line.
heck of a win.
University Hospital Sports Medicine is proud to be the official health provider of the Kenston Bombers. University Hospital Sports Medicine, your leader for comprehensive sports medicine care for athletes of all ages and levels. Provides competitive advantage on the field of play and in life. For an appointment near you, visit uhssports.org. First and 10 Chagrin at their own 20-yard line.
Ball at the 20-yard line, first and 10. Quarterback Dawson Pierce will give the ball to Perez. Jet sweep. Perez cuts inside as initially he was hemmed in, trying to get around Anthony Bellacci, and did well maybe to get a yard out of there. Second down and 9, a long 9.
Terrific run support by the secondary. Tyler Mintz on the scene as you expect he would be.
So good.
The safety, he was right there just to make sure everything was tidied up.
And on second down, the pass is over on the right side. And not surprisingly, it's Perez. Get it out to the 25-yard line. A little breathing room now. It'll be a third down and 5.
Juggle that, and they did well.
Third down and 5 on their own 25-yard line.
So on third and 5, Dawson in trouble. And Pierce able to tuck it in. He runs close to the 30-yard line, but got upended right at the first down marker. And I don't think they're going to give. Yeah, it's going to be about a half yard short.
What do you do? You should run Falls.
If you want to give Kenston all the short one, I don't think they do.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, you might see a fake here.
Decoration
Yeah.
of some sort, but
Well, remember, Gazudis is the punter, but he's also a wide receiver, and he's a guy that can do something with it. But normal snap, kick is away, and Mintz will call the fair catch and make it at his own 35-yard line.
First and 10 Bombers at the 35-yard line. A big shout out tonight to Leah Bottom. Varsity girls soccer team. Senior, she was in 2019 to Alabama.
try to keep the ball,
Right? Yeah.
keep the ball out of Kenston's hands. Give me a sneak and just throw the ball over the pile with the dive.
Something, anything, you know.
I don't blame the 36 Falls coaching staff for not being a punt. I just wonder if that was a possible fake, possible go for it.
All right, so ball at the 36-yard line. It'll be first and 10 there. Low snap for Tom Kupsik. He's back to throw. Throws right side for Mintz. Trying to make a diving catch. Just overshot him at the Chagrin Falls 48-yard line.
Second down.
Cam Owen was over there on the coverage. Just let him a hair over the second down and 10.
Yeah, Tom Kupsik, I think the reason he let him a little bit too much, he did get hit as right as he was released. I think that slightly affected the trajectory.
Second down and 10 at the 35-yard line. Jack Porter gets the carry, runs straight ahead, got to about the 37, and then got shoved down there. Adam Mellon, the linebacker, came in nicely from his inside spot to make the hit. So it sets up a third down and about 8 here for the Bombers. They don't huddle. They go very quickly now back to the formation. 2 receivers to each side. Porter stands to Tom Kupsik's left.
Could be an audible or a dummy audible.
Here, low step, Tom Kupsik's got it. Third and long, he throws. Pass is caught. Porter's got it at the 40 and put down at the 41. But that's short of the first down. Well done by the Tiger defense. And again, Adam Mellon came over to make the tackle. It'll be fourth down at the 41-yard line. Fourth and about 5. And
Mellon means business.
yes, he does.
It looks like Kenston's going for it.
Yes, at this moment it does. Now, Tom Kupsik is also the punter.
Okay.
So, yeah, there you go. He'll drift back. Nobody's back, though, for Chagrin Falls. And we've got flags down. That may have actually bailed out Chagrin Falls. False start is the call against the Bombers. So now there will be no surprise here. It will be a for sure punt situation for the Bombers.
Tons of credit to Melon there. He made 2 quality plays in that possession and forces the period.
Nice and single safety at his own 32 as Tom Cuffsick kicks it away. Actually, that's Richmond. And Richmond will let it bounce inside the 25, and it'll work to a stop at the 19-yard line. So Paul's defense does the job. Now the offense will come back on the field with 6:16 to go first quarter, 7-0 after the Middleton touchdown. See what Dawson Pierce's company can do here on their 3rd possession of this first quarter. Close to a first down. From their own 19, yeah. And Pierce going to keep it. Yeah, he ran right into the blitz and put down back at the 18-yard line. That'll be a loss of a yard or so. Michael Payton, the linebacker, was there at the bottom of the pile to make the stop. It's about a yard and a half loss. Second down and long. Nice job by the Kenston defense.
It turned into a run blitz. I think the quarterback saw that and tried to get out of it with the run.
So second and about 12. Spotted at the 17. Pierce going to throw from the quick drop. Looks right side. Overshot his intended man. And it's incomplete. But then a cornerback came over for Kenston and went high on a receiver and hit him in the head. And that's going to be... There's also a flag down in the backfield of Chagrin Falls. There's for sure going to be a personal foul penalty against Kenston. That's no doubt.
I don't know, Dino, that Castro got the head, but he was late. He was late with it. That's what got through the flag.
Kazubis was the unfortunate recipient of that shot.
Chagrin. Personal foul on Kenston.
And his personal foul against the Bombers, so...
This is weird.
They were backing it up to about the 7-yard
line. We have a little young man whose parents are lost. Mr. and Mrs. Reardon, could you please go to the bomber hangar?
Huh. Okay. Just watching as they were marking it off. That penalty. It's now 3rd down and 8. Here's Perez, gets the pitch out, runs left side, tries to go wide side to the 25. He does so. Only got him a yard up to the 26. Good job by Perez just to get something out of it. Logan Vargo came over to make the tackle. Now it is 4th down.
Okay, Dino was right.
First time, it'll be the first time this year.
No, you made the right call. You were watching the referees, which is the right thing to do. I went up the chain down and they had 1 over there, which was. But I don't get the penalty.
I don't get that either.
I thought that was an automatic first down. Was it offsetting penalties if they didn't
maybe it was. As the kick is away on the punt by Kazudis, and Mintz makes the fair catch, lost the handle, but was able to pick it up as he goes down at the 43-yard line, his own 43-yard line. That's where the Bombers will begin. Here with 5:13 to go, first quarter, 7-0 Kenston on the touchdown run from Jay Middleton. DeNatale and Dennis Manoloff with you here at Kenston Bomber Stadium. One of the defending Division III state champions who continue on this great run that they've had really since the last time there was a WKYC game of the week at this stadium, which was week 9 last year against Chardon, when Mark Bunch Bishop and I watched the Hilltoppers go on an amazing final drive.
I'll tell you what, Dino, that was a
27-24.
costly offsetting penalty.
It really was.
Yeah, I'd love to know what the penalty was on Chagrin Falls because
wiped out what would
should
have been a
been
first down.
First down.
Tom Kupsik ready to go. 1st and 10 Bombers at their own 43. Here's Porter on the run, going left side, 45-50. Out to the 45-40. Cuts inside 35, and Jack Porter put down at the Chagrin Falls 32-yard line. That is a gain of 25 big ones for Jack Porter, and a first down.
I love how Tom Kupsik carries out. He hands the ball off, and then he pretends like he's going to throw. And in that situation, it throws a couple of the DBs.
All right, and again, it's Porter getting inside the 25. Take it down to the 24-yard line.
Gain of 9, 2nd and 1 on the 24-yard line.
Quarter 9 on that gain, 2nd and 1. 4:40 to play, first quarter. Kenston already leading at 7-0, trying to tack on some more. Ryan Miller, the tight end, will go out almost wide now on the left. Trips right side for the Bombers. Moving to Jonathan Abarno. 2nd and about 2. Here's Tom Kupsik looking left, firing left. Has a man open. Miller with a diving catch. And they'll mark him down at the 1-yard line. What a catch by the sophomore tight end, Ryan Miller.
Dino, that was one of the patterns that I was watching in the afternoon that they were running. And Tom Kupsik kept hitting it. He was deadly on that very pass pattern. Down the sideline.
Both you and Brian Crane, who's the photographer here, were asking me about Miller. Because I was watching him down there too, and he's 6'5". And he's only a sophomore. 1st and goal. Here's Porter. Puts his head down, got stood up, and Adam Mellum was able to tackle him down and keep him out of the goal line. Mark him just inside the 1. It'll be 2nd and goal. But Miller got valuable playing time last year as a freshman on the state championship team, and obviously now, as a year older, he's going to get more looks.
I could be an OC for Kenston right now. Don't run behind 77. That
George Sell.
Enormous.
We'll talk about him.
He's pancaking people.
2nd and goal.
He's just a wall of humanity.
Tom Kupsik gives. Jack Porter walks in. Touchdown.
That wasn't so.
Gets his first touchdown of the season. Amazingly enough, he didn't score one last week. I mean, he had 32 rushing touchdowns for the season last year, and he gets into the end zone for the first time in 2019. 13-0 Kenston with 3:25 to go in the first quarter. Blake Torres will come in for the extra point. George Sell is the left tackle, as D-Man just mentioned a minute ago. 6'4", 265 pounds, and he is committed to Wake Forest.
Wake Forest recruit, and no wonder.
There's the extra point for Torres. It's up. It is good. 14-0 against the Bombers. One from Gene Middleton, one from Jack Porter.
Tom Kupsik, that pass was just fantastic. The catch was as well. But the pass was...
Ladies and gentlemen, this guy is in the Chevrolet of the world.
It's reasonably well covered. It's just a quality throw.
It's amazing how Williams can really outpoint that. Just made a brilliant catch. And all of a sudden, it's a 1st and 10 there. Or first that kickoff situation. 3:25 to go. It's been all Kenston here in the first quarter.
On campus to celebrate their 20th class reunion. Big shout out to the class.
And then it's take a deep breath and then hit another one. And Torres to kick off on the court in 1 minute. You got to just take it, inch by inch. The problem is they just haven't been able to get a whole lot of movement going.
Facing the Dallas Cowboys in high school. Really glad Cowboy uniforms. I love it.
Kick fielded by Perez at the 3-yard line. He'll run near side 15 and into a wall of defenders. Logan Vargo will put him down at the 19-yard line. Vargo, I'll tell you, Vargo stripped the football away from him, and had the whistle not blown, he would have had a touchdown.
Vargo was working on the ball as the whistle was being blown, and then he finally pried it loose. Now maybe the ball carrier would say, hey, let up the whistle. It was a heck of a crowbar to get that ball out of there.
First and 10 now for Kenston. Their own 19-yard line. Or Chagrin Falls, I should say, their own 19-yard line.
Chagrin Falls needs something, Dino.
Yep.
Some kind of spark, big play, first down.
Something to get them some momentum, some confidence here. All right, Dawson Pierce has them set to go. First down. He looks to throw. Locks one. Right side. Has a man there. And it is caught with a flag down at the 45-yard line. Gazudas with a tremendous rolling catch. Alex Castro had perfect coverage there. And probably too good according to the officials. That's what I think the flag is. But that's the first down of the evening for Chagrin Falls. Pass interference is the call against Kenston. Will certainly be waved off in a first down.
Castro was with him, but he was beaten, and he was face guarding essentially and threw his arms up. But that doesn't detract from the circus catch.
45-yard line.
Zudas gets them now to the 45-yard line and a first down. Exactly what they needed. Pierce will send Miguel Damascus in motion left. He'll keep it on the run, goes to his right, breaks a tackle, gets to the 50, into Bomber territory, and put down at the 48-yard line. So give him about 7 yards on the run by Dawson Pierce.
A couple of stiff arms from the quarterback. You like to see when your QB is physical in the run game.
Pretty big guy, 6'2",
137 himself.
48-yard line.
Brings up second down and 3, and makes Marino's job a little easier now. You've got some breathing room, and it's a second and manageable here. You can open up some things in the playbook. McClintock will move to the left of Pierce. Two receivers to each side. And it'll be McClintock getting the carry. Initially took it to the 47 and then got pushed all the way back into false territory. And again, Logan Fargo took away the football trying to say, yeah, I got another strip. It'll be third down.
Logan Fargo is sick and tired of these whistles. He's like, let me have the ball, please. But, you've already noticed Kenston's swarming mentality on defense. Everybody talked. Every team, every DC says, we want to swarm. These guys swarm. There's 4 guys on the ball instead of just 1.
There are really about 4 or 5 key players on the defense. Fargo's one. Third down, and flag goes down. Yeah, somebody from St. Paul's offense just kind of head bobbed a little bit there off the offensive line. That's going to move it back 5, and so instead of third and a long 2 close to 3, it's third down and 8.
Yeah, and they've gone from second and manageable to
third and a lot tougher. Yeah. 2 receivers left, one to the right, and you got a man slot right. Here's the throw, right side, pass caught, short of the first down. Gazudas again with the catch. And again, Alex Castro there on the coverage. But a good job by Pierce. My partner recognized the pressure coming in.
It's a terrific
Castro keeps him from getting the first down. Back to basically where they were a moment ago, it'll be 4th and 3.
And now, the way, Chagrin Falls coaching staff has seen Kenston move the ball, you've got to go for it. You have to the rest of the game.
Ball at the Bomber 48. They need to get to the 45 to keep this drive going. 4th and 3. Pierce trying to draw Kenston off sides. Now he gets the snap. Over the middle. Pass is caught. And then almost in and out of the hands of Perez, incomplete. He had it and was trying to turn it upfield. Tyler Mintz came over and had some help from Swatchy.
Got Kenston with the pass break up there. Tyler Kenston, but I'm sorry, that ball's got to be caught.
Yeah.
I mean, even when you're getting hit, you have to secure it.
Would have been a first down instead. It'll be Kenston football as we're in the under 2-minute stage in this first quarter, 1:45 to play, and the Bombers are already leading at 14-0.
That's a good throw by Pierce.
Had it there.
Yeah, Perez had his hands on it, and then he was hit, but he's got it.
J.Q. Toronto checks in at wide receiver. He'll go out wide left for the Bombers. 2 receivers here on the near side. Miller and tight end. Over a yard back to the right. Low snap. Kupchak's got it. Looks to throw over the middle. This wide open at the 30. He goes to the 25, 20, 15, 10, 5, and touchdown. 52 yards. John Kupchak of Tyler Mitz, their 13th connection of the year.
Just throws a dart over the middle and then lets his receiver do the rest. This is spectacular. I don't know how he got away from that would-be tackler around the 25.
And it all started, T, with the fact that it was a low snap and well, get it and pick it up and still throw a strike to Tyler Mitz. So many ways this team can beat you. Here's the extra point. Blake Torres, the holder, and Barno is going to have to eat the football as he was being pressured. And a good job by Miguel Damascus to blow it up and not allow Blake Torres to even have a chance to kick it. So that'll hold the score at 21.
Yeah, when it's 20-0 late in the first quarter, and we're talking about the flaws of the winning team, it's clearly nitpicking, but snaps have got to be cleared up.
Got to be timed.
Got to be sharp. The shotgun snap and then the snap on the kick. That's the one critique I see with this team so far.
I don't know if he's on special teams, the center, but Justin Schroeder's moved over from right guard last year to center this year, so he's still kind of figuring out, the nuances of snapping it and being the guy every down, and it's a process.
Maybe this coaching staff is extensive coaching staff this year. Mistakes don't happen.
Get up those 20s.
20-0. We're not even out of the first quarter yet.
Building the bomber squadron. Bomber barracks. He's over there.
15% of its playbook,
probably. Touchdown run from Jay Middleton, a touchdown run from Jack Porter. That was set up on a beautiful catch by Ryan Miller. And then a 52-yard strike from Tom Cupsick to Mitz. Torres will kick it off 8-0. Angle with the right side in the direction of Perez. This one flirting with the end zone. It will make it. That'll be a touchback. Perez actually also was perfect. Might be a touchback.
The 17th year of the chain gang, everybody. Keith Hamilton, Greg Schaefer, Jeff Fisher, Roger Fisher, and Rob Rahman. What a chain gang.
really derailed the win and a drop pass and it down. It's enormous, especially against a team with the caliber of Kenston.
36 to go, first quarter, 20-0 Kenston. Rossi Pierce on the 20. Here's again, we have another false start.
Flag on the play.
And that one was a Kenston defense showing the blitz and just kind of making that Chagrin Falls offensive line get a little jittery. Vargo and also Valachi were kind of going up to the line and then moving back, going up and moving back.
Timeout. Chagrin was one of those that was inflicted. They were
Krispy Kreme donuts will be for sale for $10 a box after the game outside of the home gate. All proceeds after proxy. Thank you.
Hawkeye Marino will take a timeout for Chagrin Falls. That's their first. 1:36 to play in the half, or in the first quarter, I should say. Not even the first half, it's the first quarter. Just to settle everybody down here and get them refocused. Kenston is just, they've been put striking and some semblances on the last drive, but they've also been methodical. Move it down, punch with the run, punch with the run. Now, seeing the Bombers have won their first time since winning the state championship last year. Thus far. First and 15, here's the throw, looking right side, through the fingers of Perez. That was a tough catch for him, and it was almost intercepted.
I don't blame Perez there. That's just an inaccurate throw. Perez did well to get his claw on it, but he was in no position to make the catch because he was getting drilled at the time that he got his ball.
Second and 15. Will Richard's been quiet so far. He's out wide to the left.
Unless it's a playoff.
He's out to the right. Second and 15. Here's the roll right, pass caught at the 20. Kazuna breaks away at the 25 and takes it out to the 26, maybe 27-yard line. Close to the first down and bring up a 3rd and 3. Nice job by Lucas Gazutis, who's had a pretty good first quarter here for the Chagrin Falls Tigers. Quickly to the line now.
Here they go.
Mark it at the 26. 3rd and 3. Throw left side is incomplete. Looking in the direction of Perez, a little bit high, but again, Xavier notes probably should have pulled it down. Vargo and Kalenic were over on the coverage. It'll be a 4th down and a punting situation.
I would have liked for Pierce to have that ball. Yeah, I think he is super difficult to actually.
Xavier won that one. When you get it, Middleton and Mintz in double safeties back inside the 40-yard line. Low snap, Gazutis gets the kick away. High but short and drifting to the right. It will stay on the Chagrin Falls side of the field. They'll mark it 45-yard line. Short field for Kenston at the 45-yard line of Chagrin Falls.
I'm always fascinated how these side judges figure out exactly where the ball went out of bounds.
I know. It's like sometimes it's like I feel like they flip a coin.
They're able to get their GPS
right,
out
exactly.
and go, it went out right here.
A couple of scores courtesy of our man Tyler Carey here. Men are leading St. Ignatius 7-6 in the first quarter at Ford Stadium. Perry leading Chardon 10-7 in the first quarter. Kirtland and Riverside scoreless in the first, and Worcester out to a 10-0 lead on the St. Wadsworth Grizzlies team that we saw last week overwhelm Highland. Posted throughout the night. 48 seconds to go, first quarter. Kenston, as they get the snap, whistles blow. And again, some stadiums here, and this is one of the really premier, Division III stadiums you'll find anywhere in Northeast Ohio, much less the state of Ohio. They don't have the play clock, by the end zones or anything, or under the thing. So the quarterback basically has got to do it in his head to figure out the huddle clock here. It makes it a little tougher. Makes it tougher for us announcers too. So 1st and 15 right at midfield, 50-yard line. Tom Kupsik will give the ball to Porter, runs right side, got a block from Mintz, goes inside to the 45, and takes it down to the 41-yard line of Chagrin Falls. So in at 9 for Porter. And it'll bring up a 2nd and 6 and probably take us into the second quarter. If they want
really nice block by Jeremiah Jones there. Left guard.
20 seconds to go here. Gets the snap. Low snap. He's got it. Over the middle. Pass caught. Middleton runs to his left. Gets the first down at the 35. High steps his way to the 31 and then got smashed down at the 31-yard line by Owen McClintock. But a nice piece of open field running by Jay Middleton. He's been impressive in this first quarter.
The 31-yard line.
Kenston's offense has such speed. It's very evident right on that.
I'm going to say Middleton stepped down to 33, by the way. But impressive start to the game for Kenston. They lead at 20-0 after 1 quarter of play here at Kenston Conference Stadium.
What does that make it? Dino now 5 quarters that Kenston is playing.
Visit the boosters website for more information.
55.
Yes. And they haven't allowed a point since the first quarter of the state championship game. They actually felt also check 6-0 and then for 42 minutes. So even back to the second quarter of the state championship game, we're talking about 7-8 quarters of scoreless football.
And so you're saying they had 42 on each with the state championship. Plus 20 here is 62 plus 35.
97-0.
97-0 on a 97-0 run.
Yes,
that's pretty good.
That's what we're saying. That's exactly what we're saying.
I got 2 words, as advertised.
Yes.
And I hear about Kenston's offense. and their defense. And so far, that's it.
You can't keep one guy. I mean, you've seen Porter, Tom Hubson, Mintz, Miller, Middleton. Good luck.
First to take on.
And behind, as you pointed out, an offensive line, you've got 130 starters, including First and 10. Actually, the third and 2. Now the Kenston heading north as low snap. Tom Kupsik picks it up on a busted play. He's going to keep it running inside the 30. And late flag coming in for a late hit out of bounds. Bryce Sellers got a little bit anxious as he knocks Tom Kupsik out of bounds. If that's a running back, maybe they could let you get away with it, not the quarterback.
Great point. He's got to release, once he gets him out of bounds. It's not like you rammed him into the ground or anything, but he held on to the tackle.
Great job by Tom Kupsik. Snap kind of goes, gets on that field turf. No panic. Picks it up and runs. So they'll tack on the gain at the 15 yards after the play, and they'll move now the ball to the 14-yard line, where it will be first down and 10. Barno, Tyler Mintz, and also Jane Middleton out wide left. Wide right, I should say. Ryan Miller wide left. Porter to the left of Tom Kupsik. First and 10 from the 14. Tom Kupsik has it. Looks to Miller. End zone. Makes the catch. Touchdown. There they go again. As Ryan Miller made the catch and was knocked out of the end zone, and as my partner points out, we tended to, and I think they got him on his feet.
But he looked like he heard something.
14 yards on the touchdown connection from John Tom Kupsik to Ryan Miller. It's Miller's first touchdown catch of the season, and for John Tom Kupsik, that is 2 touchdown passes tonight, 5 on the season in 2 games. Miller's got he's gimpy on his right leg, where he tended to over on the bench.
Terrific catch. Extended to get it. Another quality throw by Tom Kupsik, but it's unfortunate for Kenston that Miller appears to be hobbled.
That's the extra point. Torres, as the flag goes down, the kick is good. Check on the flag. Or the flag is, I think, against no, it's actually against Kenston. Torres may have to kick it again.
They're working on
they're stretching out that right leg. Torres have to kick it again.
Let's try this one again.
They'll put it down at the 15. Barno will put it down at the 15. So it's essentially now it's a 25-yard extra point attempt. Torres last year did all the kickoffs, and Anna Sanders ended up handling extra points and field goals. Good snap and hold. Torres' kick on the line drive is up, and it is good. Just like he did. It's 27-0. Anna Sanders handled all the extra points and field goals, especially towards that end of the year. She became the first female ever to score points in the state championship game. She was, I think, 7 in the extra points in the state championship.
27-0. Watching Miller being tended to by the training staff, they work on his right leg, and then he pops up and puts the headset on. So the coaches are like, all right, what's your deal?
Yeah.
You all right?
You're all right? We need you back in there. We're not done yet.
What's the situation? He's trying to work something out in his right leg. I doubt that he cramped as soon as he went up, but he's shaking his right leg.
Sometimes this is the season. Like the first 3 weeks of high school football season, even on a night where it's not super much, certainly it's very seasonable tonight. It's beautiful. But you get cramped. I mean, it's just what happens. Miller talked to the coaches there.
He's moving better. Just keep shaking the ball. Kenston was fantastic.
No, and the thing is, Ryan Miller was only a small part of what they were doing last year. Now, granted, they had part of that group of he brings a different dimension of his size to this passing attack. Torres will kick it on the ground this time. It'll be fielded by Richmond, and he'll take it across the 25. I think it's a mark at about the 28-yard line. Chagrin Falls trailing 27-0. We'll start there. But you have a target. This offense is 6'5". With the way John Thompson can swing the football, it's a different dimension than the wide receivers than Middleton and Vince who are 5'9" and 5'10".
It's going to be fun to watch Miller put some pounds on that frame. It's as long as he's right now. He adds muscle to that frame. It's going to be that much fun.
And colleges are going to be calling Jeff Rubich down in too. That's Division I size. Tight end. First down, a little pitch out. Comes to Perez, makes a stunner step, takes it out to the 30-yard line. Short gain of about 2 for Xavier Perez. Last week, he ran the ball 5 times for 27 yards and a touchdown, in addition to the kick return that was scored. Second down at the 18.
Slow development play. You can't expose your situation at Kenston's defense. There was nothing Perez could do.
11:15 to play, first half, 27-0 Kenston. John Tom Kupsik has thrown 2 touchdowns. Jack Porter with a touchdown run. Jay Middleton has a touchdown run. Perez will shift right to left, trips left side for Falls. Second down and 8. The pass sails over the head and almost intercepted. It was over the head of Adam Monday, and if that's intercepted by Middleton, he's going the other way for a touchdown.
It was just a poorly thrown ball, too high, and we probably surprised Middleton a little bit because that was dangerously close to it.
Third down and 8. Wow. I mean, Middleton's eyes must have been the size of grapefruits. Wow. I was not expecting that. Third down and 9. Dawson Pierce out of the shotgun. Vargo showing blitz at the line of scrimmage. Now he backs up. Here's the throw. Walks one over the middle. Nobody home. Incomplete. Closest man to the football was Will Richmond, who was being well covered by the Bombers. It'll be a 4th and long, and we'll see the punt team coming to the field.
I don't buy that was thrown away because he had time to throw. I think that just scored it out. I mean, it was way too high.
Zudis will stay in the game to punt. And
only a 3-man rush, by the way, from Kenston on that play, so confused Pierce a little bit.
Kenston brings Tyler Minson to pressure the punter. Here he comes, and now Middleton will be the lone man back to receive, and has to go through his hands. I don't know if he touched it. Now he did touch it, and he's got Pounce on it back at the 18-yard line. And I got to tell you, Jay was very lucky that Chagrin Falls didn't come away with that football.
Yeah, there were several times during that attempted return where the ball was loose, and he just kept reeling it in, dropping and reeling it in.
Initially, when he let it go, I thought he might have gone through his arms, and I thought he had touched it. But the second time, he knew for sure he had a fall on it.
It was fortunate to because multiple Chagrin Falls players were there.
It was interesting, just a different look there on the punt team. Usually they go Mintz and Middleton on the double team, but that time they used Mintz to pressure the punter, and had Middleton back in single safety. So Kenston will start at their own 18-yard line. Good to see Ryan Miller back in there. He's playing over on the slot left side. Tom Kupsik with 4 wide receivers sends a man in motion, gives it to Mintz, but a flag comes down as that handoff takes place. Penalty here. We also got a man down. We've got an injured offensive lineman. Cale Doyle, the right guard for the Bombers, is down and in some pain.
Yeah, that looks bad. I mean, just the way he's reacting to it.
And immediately his teammates are going to a knee, and now they're going to back off here, and each side will go to their respective bench. Still don't even know what the penalty is at this point, but the concern is for sophomore guard Cale Doyle, getting his first opportunity as a varsity starter. And this offensive line, and just that penalty flag kind of took everybody off guard, I think. And they've got Doyle now seated, but they're looking at his leg, and now they're going to put him back down on his back.
I saw Harris Scaramandis coming in, running in as soon as whistle stopped play, so I'm assuming he's going to take over.
If you're just joining us here at Kenston Bomber Stadium, we've got 10:39 to play in the first half, and Kenston has been impressive, as you expect, offensively here tonight, and they have scored touchdowns on 4 of their 5 possessions to lead at 27-0. A touchdown run from Jay Middleton, their wide receiver, on a jet sweep. A touchdown run from 1 yard by Jack Porter that was set up by a brilliant catch by Ryan Miller. Back to him in a second. A 52-yard scoring strike from John Tom Kupsik to Tyler Mintz, and then a 14-yard TD pass from Tom Kupsik to Miller over on our left side there a few moments ago. And those are your 4 touchdowns from the Kenston Bombers. Chagrin Falls has managed, by my count, just 1 first down here in this first half as they get Doyle up and on his feet. That's good. And he's going to limp off. And he's trying to squat up. Yeah. He's got to come off for at least 1 play, but I wonder again, D-Man, if that's not a panic situation.
He's a gamer because he went right to the huddle and tried to stay in the game. And the officials are like, no, you got to take a seat.
But that's certainly good news. Now, the penalty was against the Bombers, and it moves it back to the 13-yard line, so we first and 15 there.
You know what that was, Dino? I never saw it.
I didn't either. It was either motion or delay of game. Good to have Dennis Manoloff on News Radio WTAN 1100 joining me here tonight. He'll be with us on a number of these Friday night games.
If you'll have me.
We'll have you. This is fun. High school football on a Friday night on WKYC.com. Game of the week. Tom Kupsik goes on first and 15. Porter with the catch at the 20. Goes forward to the 24-yard line. That's 11 of those 15 yards needed there. So bring up a second down and 4.
I've got Cameron Owen making a tackle that needed to be made, or that could have been a 40 to 50 yard.
You want Porter with a full head of steam. Second down. Well, Markham actually at the 24, so it's 2nd and 5. Here comes jet sweep. Mintz running left to the 25, flag down, and he goes out of bounds at the 26-yard line, and probably an illegal block downfield by J.P. Germano, the wide receiver, trying to spring him outside.
They'll be holding against the Bombers.
Holding against the Bombers is indeed the case, so that'll nullify the run by Tyler Mintz. And again, these are one of those things that, Jeff Rubich, I'm sure, they will talk about afterwards. It hasn't been a clean half, despite the fact that 27-0. There have been a few penalties in this football game against the Bombers.
Yeah, and a perfectionist like Coach Rubich is going to be grinding the box and the snaps and the penalties and the
because those are correct, Chris. Like I say, those are things we can correct. We can clean up
He's
ourselves.
not going to worry about what the score is. He's going to say we got to
After the penalty at 2nd and 10, the
Yeah,
pass
right.
caught goes to Germano, and he'll make the catch right at that first down marker at the 29-yard line. So the guy who committed the penalty on the previous play comes right back. The quarterback goes right to him and touched him on the helmet and said, I threw right to you. That's a touchdown pickup.
Yeah, and yet another pro-style throw from Tom Kupsik. He stands in the pocket, surveys the field, and just fires one right down the middle on the money. He does.
Porter stands to his left, trips left side here for Tom Kupsik. 10 at the 29. Fake to Porter. Tom Kupsik throws. Middleton with the catch at the 35.
Oh!
Makes a great move at the 40. To the 50. Middleton, 45. And put down at the 45-yard line of Chagrin Falls. Oh, man.
That's a video game fake right there from Mr. Middleton.
Did he hit the X button or the circle button there?
Wow.
Jay Middleton
Yeah,
with a
that's a
beautiful
Frogger
run.
move.
First down for the Bombers into Tiger territory. At the 45-yard line, trips left. Miller goes out wide right. We've seen everybody here on this Bomber offense with some highlight reel plays in this first half. Shotgun. Tom Kupsik gives. Now he'll keep. He'll go to the 40. John to the 35-yard line. Right at that first down marker and out of bounds there. That'll be a first down pickup as they'll mark him near the 34. Give him 11. And a nice fake to Jack Porter.
Kenston said, you know what, we haven't thrown Tom Kupsik around the right side.
Let's try that.
Let's see what that'll do.
I take that back. It's a 9-yard gain. I saw the official on the near side mark it for 34. They actually put 36, so second and 1. Kupsik last year, 515 yards and 15 gains. He rushed for 15 touchdowns.
He's clearly athletic, and you can see that.
And if you key on Porter in that read option, he'll keep it. This is Jack Porter, though, on the run to the 30. Porter first down to the 26-yard line before Will Richmond will put him down there. Another first down for the Bombers. That one from Jack Porter.
Interior of the Kenston line.
Nitz and Middleton go out wide right. Mono and Miller out to the left. First and 10 at the 26 for the Bombers. Here comes Porter again. Breaks a tackle to the 20, inside the 20, down in the 19, maybe the 18-yard line. Jack Porter was one missed tackle away from getting a touchdown, but Will Richmond, the rover, again makes the play. 2nd and 2.
Porter continues to pile up yards after contact.
He loves that. 2nd and 2. Here he comes again to the 15. Porter breaks the tackle at the 10, 5, and touchdown. Brilliant piece of running by Jack Porter. His second touchdown of the first half.
I love it. No center penalties. He keeps the pads low. Guys bounce off of him. And then at the end there, instead of dumping to the pylon, he's like, I'm going to keep going. I'll deliver the ball if
That drive started by Middleton and then turned into the Jack Porter show.
Clinical.
33-0 Bombers with 8:03 to go in the first half. The offense for Kenston virtually unstoppable here. This is a fake. They'll look to the end zone. Nabarno throws, and it is caught for the 2-point conversion. By 2. Anthony Velacci made that catch. I didn't think the snap was. I thought that looked like a good snap that time.
You called it right away. You said fake. So I'm having a little trouble with the glare off the press box window. But I didn't see it because the snap was. I wonder.
We'll have to ask them after the game.
I wonder about. Are you really faking it at this point?
At this time of the game. It just, because the fact that Velacci was open and the way it looked, it didn't look like a busted fake. That was the only reason why I thought that. But we'll have to ask. I'm curious about that. But the 2-point conversion, no matter how you slice it, is good. 35-0 Kenston with 8:03 to go in the half.
So you know what Kenston could say, if in fact it wasn't designed, they would say that we were just trying to get on the schedule with 7 points on each touchdown. Touchdown plus 9. We've got on schedule now 35%. That's no issues there.
And it's nice for them. Jonathan Nabarno, who's now a wide receiver, really part of the starting offense, he was the backup quarterback last year. So he obviously can throw. And a nice strike to Velacci there.
Yeah, that had some heat. That throw had some heat too. Well, the Chagrin Falls student section is undaunted.
I love seeing that. It's one of the great traditions. Chagrin Falls, I can remember doing games at their place. It's one of the nicest kind of old school stadiums you'll find in Northeast Ohio. As Perez gets the kick out to the 8-yard line, forward to the 20, and knocks down at about the 23-yard line. It's really a great facility. Once upon a time, about 10 years ago, not that long, Chagrin Falls was a state championship contender. They went to back-to-back state championships before in 2009 and then again in 2010. And in that period, from about 2009 to 2013, they were as good as anybody in Northeast Ohio, especially this part of the area. Just a house team. I can remember a bunch of Aurora Chagrin Falls games when they were both in the CBC, and that was always the game of the year. it's a great tradition, and I know it's been a tough start to the season. First down, Pierce will give to McClintock, and McClintock is smothered in the backfield, back at the 20-yard line. Connor Kratzer led the charge there from his defensive tackle spot. He'll get credit for TFL back to the 21-yard line. Lost it too.
That's a miscount. It put McClintock in a terrible spot. By the time he got the ball, the guy was on him.
Second down and 12.
We are. I mean, what is the continuous clock?
I think it's 35. Well, once we get to the second half.
Second half. Okay, so there's no continuous clock.
Is it 30 or
30?
Second half.
Okay, that's what it is.
They've changed that rule. Pierce pumping once, now throwing right side, has a man open, and he overshot Lucas Gazutis right about the 50-yard line.
Gazutis had his man beat.
And he had a step on Castro, and it'll bring up a third down and 12. So you heard the guys behind us in second half. As long as it's a 30-point lead, the clock will run the entire half.
Dynamic duo of writers behind us. They know a lot about both these teams.
Well, I always need the guys.
We got the scouting reports
from them
when we came in.
Listen, they're always important for scouting, but also the rules changes and things like that. These guys do a good job keeping us honest. As the OHSA always likes to change things. Third down and 12. Pierce is going to run it here at the 25. Puts his head down to the 29-yard line, but he'd be a little bit short of the first down. Anthony Valachi with the tackle. 29-yard line. It'll be fourth down and about
4th down and 6.
Pierce is a football player.
I like him. I like the way he plays.
He's a gamer. He made the best out of a bad situation there and delivers the ball at the end. He's not afraid of contact.
This time it'll be Middleton and Mintz in double safeties at their own 40-yard line as Lucas Gazutis has been busy punting the football this evening. That one takes a couple skips on the turkey, picks it up and gets the kick away. And we'll check on the flag in a second. Middleton makes the catch at the 40-yard line. Runs left 45, gets to the 50, near side 45 and out of bounds at the 44-yard line.
Dino, is it going to be roughing or running into?
Personal foul.
Yep. All right, automatic personal. I guess I could see it both ways, but it looked to me like he ran into him. But the ref said no.
Personal foul, roughing the kicker on the Bombers. Automatic.
Tiger offense will come back on the field. Yeah. They'll get some real estate after that as well. As that will move it up to the 44-yard line. And an automatic first down.
First and 10.
So 6:20 to play here in this first half. That's only the second first down that the Tigers have gotten here.
Let's see if Chagrin Falls can capitalize on it.
Let's see if they go back, D-Man, over on it to Gazulis again. And try maybe that fly route that they had earlier. Matched up one-on-one here on the near side against Alex Castro. Shotgun to Pierce. First and 10. Chagrin Falls at their own 44. Fake handoff. Pierce will dump it out to Perez at the 45. Castro with a couple of teammates to help him out. They put him down near the 48-yard line. A gain of about 4 on that flip over to Xavier Perez.
Castro does a really nice job of tracking the ball. He is very good at getting to the ball in a hurry.
Second and 7.
Second and 7. There's 6 minutes to go in the half. Will Richmond will be out wide to the left. Gazutis wide right. Perez over on the wing to the right side. Drew Zimmer. Second and 6. Perez now in motion going left side. High snap, pulled down by Pierce. He'll run it to the 49-yard line. Then lost the football. And it's going to be Kenston ball. As making the recovery was linebacker Frank DeMarco. As Pierce was trying to make something happen, he took it near the 50, but had it punched away from him. And DeMarco on the recovery, first down, Bombers. 5:29 to go before halftime.
First and 10, Kenston at the Chagrin.
Right when they had some momentum going.
They get a break, they get the roughing the penalty break, or roughing the punter break, and they, Pierce gets popped. Good physical slung to the ball by Kenston.
So much gets talked about with the offense, and deservedly so, and they've scored 70 points in the first 2 games. But this Kenston defense, they deserve a lot of credit too. Yep.
They're obviously well coached.
5 wide receivers, empty backfield, including Porter, is overall on a slot left. Tom Kupsik, an empty backfield, 1st and 10. At the 48 of Chagrin Falls, John looks to throw, fires over the middle, pass caught Tyler Mintz at the 40. Mintz runs to his right, gets the first down as the flag goes down at the 35-yard line. So spot Mintz down near the 34. The flag came down at the 39. Somebody, I think, was probably trying to help spring his teammate to the outside and maybe committed a holding or an illegal block. That's exactly
go. Get your
saw a double team by 2 linemen down the field there. Like one of them hooked the Chagrin Falls player.
Just had to look to see, make sure Cale Doyle was back there. 7-2.
After that penalty, 1st and 17 from Kenston.
Shaken up by previous possession. No, he's not in there right now, but he's also not being tended to. That's certainly good news. Penalty makes it 1st and 17 after the hold. Again, same formation. Porter amongst the 5 wide receivers in an empty backfield situation for John Kupsik, who goes to throw. Over the middle. Pass on a rolling catch. It's Mintz right at the first down marker at the 38-yard line of Chagrin Falls. Beautiful throw. Great catch right at the marker. 17 yards first down.
Continue to be impressed by Tom Kupsik's accuracy. He just puts the ball where it needs to be.
Now Kupsik ready. Takes the Porter. Keeps it, runs left side to the 35. Gets a couple of hits. Keeps going to the 34. And then Will Richmond will make the tackle with some help from Adam Monday.
That's what I love about actually both these quarterbacks is their willingness to get hit. Now, I know the coaches will say, we don't want our quarterbacks to get hit. But here, Tom Kupsik has the option to duck out of bounds. And he's like, no, I'm ducking in. I know I'm going to get hit, but I want a couple extra yards.
Now, this is not going to make Jeff Grubich happy. After you get that, the run from John Tom Kupsik, there's a personal foul penalty called against the Bombers. Back it all the way back into Kenston territory to their 41-yard line. It's 21 yards they had to move back.
1st and 22.
So that's first and 22. 4:30 on the turning clock to play in the first half. 35-0 Kenston. Spike the penalty. Porter to the right of John Tom Kupsik. 3 receivers left. Fake the handoff. Tom Kupsik throws Mintz with the catch at the 39-yard line and immediately tackled there. Good one-on-one hit from Cam Owen.
Very nice. Owen has made a couple of those today. A couple of tackles that
Lost it too.
needed to be made or potential for a big game.
So that would make it 2nd and 24 now for the Bombers. We're under 4 minutes to play here in the first half. 35. Chagrin Falls nothing. John Kupsik has thrown 2 touchdowns. Jack Porter with 2 TD runs. Kupsik to throw on 2nd and long. Looks deep left side. Rolling catch made by Mintz at the 47-yard line. Knee goes down. 47-yard line of Chagrin Falls, just to clarify. And it's a 3rd down and a little bit more manageable here.
Dino, I'm transfixed by George Sell, the left tackle. I can't stop watching. It's like normally you watch the quarterback and the receivers and running. I'm watching the left tackle.
He's fun.
He's just enormous and he's really, really good.
Whistles blow here, and a timeout taken by Chagrin Falls. As the ball now is at the 47 of Chagrin Falls. It's going to be 3rd and 20. So when they said it was 1st and 24, that wasn't what it was. It was like 1st and 44. But it's now 3rd and 20. They have to get to the 20, just inside the 28-yard line of the Titans to keep the drive going.
We'll roll up on Coach Grubich after the game and say, commit all these penalties because we kept messing us up on our down.
Right?
He'd probably stare a hole right through us. probably seething right now.
Well, he got mad at Mark Munch Bishop last year because we did one of the playoff games and Munch, it was raining and Munch didn't stay for the post game interview. He left, so I was down with Coach myself, and Coach is like, "Tell Munch, I'm mad he's not here." So he keeps notes of things like that.
These programs, these state championship programs, like Kenston, they have such a standard. They're going to say, the coaching staff will say, you can't get away with this sloppiness against certain teams.
It's tougher as the year progresses. You can't do it against the Shark. Do it against the Riverside. Third down and 20. Back to throw Tom Kupsik. Flush at the 50. He's going to run to the 45 and out of bounds at the 42-yard line is where the spot. Give him 5, and it brings up a 4th down and 15 with exactly 3 minutes to go in the half.
Of course, you go for it.
Yeah.
You got to Chagrin Falls 42, so might as well.
May as well. Yeah, you're kind of in that zone. So have to get inside the 28-yard line to keep the drive going. 4th and 15 for Kenston at the Falls 42. Quarter to Tom Kupsik's left. Trips receivers right, one to the left. 4th and 15. Here's Tom Kupsik with time. Fires deep right side. Mitch with the catch. First down inside the 20. 15, 10. Out of bounds. Okay. Out of bounds at the 17-yard line. It will be 1st and 10 there, and a gain of about 25 on that pickup. That was a beautiful throw.
That's the arm we're talking about. The arm plus the accuracy. You've got to have a strong arm to get that ball across the field to the sideline, and the accuracy, of course, on display once again.
And his receivers, he knows where they're going to be every time, especially Mintz and Middleton.
They're having no problem getting open, but Tom Kupsik is putting the ball right in their hands.
First down and 10 for Kenston at the 17 of Chagrin Falls. Tom Kupsik looks left, fires left side. Barno incomplete. Had a step and just couldn't pull it in.
And the young man knows he should have had it. He's not happy with himself. Another beautifully thrown ball.
Similar to what we saw the touchdown to Miller earlier in this quarter. Barno is 5'9", Miller is 6'5". I mean, inch or two may have helped Jonathan there to make that catch.
A terrific catch by Barno, but he slammed the turf after the winning complete. So
defensive holding, by the way. Defensive holding was called, by the way, against Chagrin Falls. So that is going to move the football down inside the 10 at about the 9. And it's going to be 2nd down and about 2, if I can read the yard markers right. Tom Kupsik with Porter to his right. Ball inside the 10. Tom Kupsik looks left, throws left. Barno open. He's got it. Touchdown! All the way back to him.
I mean, is that pretty on the same play? Same guy. I love this coaching staff. They're like, you know what? We're going to go right back to you. Yep. And this time, you made the catch.
This time, you're the catch.
I mean, this guy, Tom Kupsik, holy mackerel. He's put the ball on a string right to their close. Beautifully thrown ball. And it wasn't poorly covered either. It was wide open. But he puts it right where the receiver needs it. And an excellent catch.
Tom Kupsik now with 3 touchdown passes in this first half, and they've been to 3 different receivers.
Barno's like, thanks, Coach, and thanks, Tom Kupsik, for letting me redeem myself.
Well, it's funny. We saw that earlier. J.P. Germano gets whistled for a penalty for a hold. They go right back to him, makes a first down catch. Yeah. Middleton makes a great block to spring one of his teammates, I think it was Porter, and the next play he gets the ball. Yeah. The coaches do that.
No dog houses, reward guys for quality plays,
and redeem them if they need it. Yep.
By the way, I say redemption at a Barno. It was a tough catch. The first one that went off his ball. But he wanted it. He felt it.
Here's Torres for the extra point. The 2:42 to go in the half, and had some pressure coming in, and the kick is no good, and it was nearly again not a good snap, and Miguel Damastis nearly blocked it, but the bad snap and Damastis' charge really disrupted the timing. So again, something I'm sure they're gonna work on. They're gonna talk about special teams. They're gonna want to score the snap hold in the kick game.
You know what though, had some coaches as far as I can see, there's none of them are jumping on the street.
No.
It's not like they're getting history on it.
And I noticed that earlier in the team that made the he went over to the offensive came out, put him on the helmet, said, hey, shake it off. And Jay did. I mean, he's made a couple of big plays in the half.
Maybe behind the scenes, they're peeling paint, but it certainly looks like this is a measured coaching staff that doesn't go crazy.
41-0 after the extra point was no good. Of course, it's probably their first miss of the season, but it wasn't all Blake's fault because the timing was so disrupted there. Kick it off. Keep it middle of the field, and it'll be Perez making the catch at about the 15. Perez goes forward to the 25 and out to the 26-yard line. Clock runs with 2:30 to go here in this first half. 41-0. Kenston putting on an absolute show here in their home opener in 2019.
Both sides of the ball. Offense is done for spots and center. It gets in its own way every once in a while. And then the defense is just too much speed, too much physicality for sure.
2:11 now to play. Clock stops. First and 10 now. Lawson Pierce and the Tiger offense. Pierce fakes it and keep it inside the 30 and Pierce moves the pile forward nicely. Dawson Pierce out to about the 33-yard line. I love seeing that. Gets about 6 on first down.
He's competing.
Yep.
That's all you can ask at this stage. For Chagrin Falls, you know you're going to lose. You've got to go about 30 points.
Play it hard for these final 2+ quarters here.
Don't worry about the scoreboard. You just have to try to get a first down. Chance to compete.
Second down and 5 here for the Tigers, I should say. They're on 33 yards. They trail the Bombers. This time it'll be Owen McClintock getting the carry as McClintock takes the cross to 35 and out near the first down. He'll get the first down and still spot him at the 38-yard line. A piece of running there by McClintock. Down to a minute 20 to play in this first half. Clock start momentarily to move the chains. At halftime, we'll have both of the bands for you here at Kenston Bomber Stadium. D-Man and I will get you ready for the second half. We'll be in the running clock mode for the entire second half. Again, on the read option, here's Keith. Here's the ball down on the 39-yard line. Just kind of took what he could there and grinded out and get half a yard. Chagrin Falls will probably run one more play here before halftime.
I think Pierce would like to have the read portion of that read option back. I think he has an issue. He should have
So it would have gotten more than what he got there. Yeah, the second down and about 9. Pierce going to throw it this time, and the pass is behind Perez. Here's the pass at 50. Yeah, he was open there too. Alex Korenick was over on the coverage, and that'll stop the clock with 24 seconds to go in the half. Third down and 9.
24 seconds remaining in the half.
Now remember, everybody, we put the poll out on Monday around noon or so at WKYC.com. Give you a chance to vote on where D-Man and I will greet you from next Friday. D-Man hoping it's somewhere in North Royalton. Can't guarantee that, but we'll look we'll look forward to being somewhere next week. And as a flag will come down.
Stadium, Scranton, Ohio.
That is, you talk about one of the new style stadiums in Northeast Ohio. They scored that's a beautiful facility.
It's such a nice setting, too.
Metro Parks, yeah, it's great. We'll announce, Tyler Carey and I will announce around 5 o'clock on Wednesday where we will go. So you have a little over 2 days to get your votes in. So the penalty, a motion penalty, brings up 3rd and 14. Pierce does a little pump fake and then runs it across the 40-yard line and got popped by Eric Dombrowski as he took it to the 40-yard line. That was a big hit by Dombrowski.
I got Logan Vargo with the finish. He comes in there.
Vargo was dying.
Exclamation point on that tackle.
That'll do it for the first half. Logan Vargo, I think, is dying to get in his football game. That'll do it for the first half. The Kenston Bombers, the defending state champions in Division III, playing their first home game since winning it all last year, and they look every bit like a championship contender here tonight. They lead 41-0 over Chagrin Falls at the break. We will move over from D-Man and I and let you see as we hop over to the band. Enjoy halftime, everyone, and D-Man and I will be back with you for the second half in just a little bit. Again, 41-0 in favor of the Bombers at the half. Wow. Pretty amazing.
Just like you guys said, all their stars come out and just dominate. Oh, goodness. Wholesale substitutions in the second half.
I would think so, yeah.
Good evening, football fans. Please put your hands together for your 2019 Chagrin Falls Titans High School Marching Band as they led in the field by student field commanders Julian Solmer and Hannah Wilson. In our first show of the year, we are bringing back Stadium Rock and Roll to Friday Night Lights with a tribute to legendary British band Queen. We kick off our show with
what it was something was on mic level and you got it. So yeah. Well, hi, buddy. Well, once we figured out that the switch needed to be at line level, not mic level, everything was great now. Yeah, it was on. It needed to be on line level on the mixer. So that's what that was. Yeah, because I turned the crowd mic all the way down. I didn't even when you said that was a problem. I turned it all the way down. Well, if that's the case, then that's, don't worry about it. Yeah, actually I do. Yeah. was born for the rock anthems, and no Queen show would be complete without their 1978 smash hit, Fat Bottom Girl.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'll keep the band. I'll keep it out for the band. But yeah, no freezing. Oh, perfect. Of course. No, yeah, I didn't have it. No, but if that's all it is, then then we'll sit with Chris Coons next week, and we'll find a different chord. We'll do a better chord. Maybe it's it might be also. I mean, the mixer is everything is coming across it like the mixer's okay, but it might be a bad mixer, or something we need to do there. So. I know it's like I couldn't text back as much as I wanted to. So, okay. No, it's all good. No, it's okay. I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, but and we talked about this.
Our trombone section for their dedicated commitment.
Chagrin Falls and have you on the phone.
Freshman arena bar, Aaron Hartz and Nathan Hill, with sophomores Charlie Simmerman, Noah O'Connor, J.P. Goss, Alex Hazel, and Austin Pilar, and seniors Christian Furman and Sidney Roush. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause. Our closing theme song this evening has been called the #1 feel-good song of all time. And for good reason. It has more than 500 million plays on Spotify, crushing all of the competition. Featuring our trombone section, here is Don't Stop Me Now.
I'll text. As soon as the band's done, I'll swap out the chords before D-Man and I start the second round, so we should be good. All right, brother man, I appreciate it. We're going to swap out microphones in a second. It's not anything.
On behalf of the entire Chagrin Falls band, this evening, it's like my fellow Tiger.
Love it if it stayed this way. Knowing their audio.
No, I think it's either this chord or the mixer isn't great, so it's
right, so you've got 35, 41.
And there was
What was
42.
the other one? 42?
42.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, they were down 6-0. And they won 42-6, right?
Yep.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Kenston High School Marching Band is under the direction of Mr. Jeff Link and Mr. Scott Shell. University of Akron student teacher Mr. Thomas Eaton and PhD coach Mrs. Kathy Martin. The band is led on the field by senior field commander Sarah Sawyer and junior player Ryan. The senior show features two legendary bands, the Sticks and the Rolling Stones. We feature a mix of ballad introductions and hard-hitting rock. We begin this with progressive rock band Sticks and their hits Grand Illusions and Renegade.
Tyler's pleased overall.
Yeah.
Hopefully the trainer will be pleased. What's this? Pick up more volume.
Paint it black.
Hey, which one of you said can't trust the OHS? Yeah, you gotta trust this guy back here. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You know why? Because
change the winds.
Not that, but they put out this awesome information after the Kenston State Championship game. They said Anna Sanders was the first female kicker as well. They did stop the game the next night. They also, in their write-up, HSA, they wrote up the state championship recaps, and they said she's the first female kicker to score a point in the state championship game, and she's the second. It's funny because everyone just picked up on what they tweeted. I think it started actually with this old guy, John. He's really good guy. He's been doing it for a long time, and he's one of the best. But he tweeted that might, after she kicked, he said that might be your first female. He said might. So, no, actually, I think he submitted notes to OHSA saying she might be the first female. And OHSA grabbed it and said, yes, she is. And everyone, they said it, everyone else on the nation, Davies, and everyone started tweeting out, first female kicker, but it wasn't. She's at Ashland. She's dressing for games, that's her name. Stations have that. So he's a safety graduate, 2012 or 13 graduate. He's ranked number one, this is third in the U.S. rank. So he's probably going to make all the games. Well, we'll see, you never know, because they only take two. Maybe they'll take 2 goals. Or maybe is it 2 or 3 goals? I know it's 2 for swimming. Track and field, it might be 3. Maybe, I don't know. He's right for this. Earlier this spring, he's right
in Don't know arigato, Mr. Roboto.
One fall.
Right, that's the thing. This kid from Solon is a lefty, and his senior year, he went to Kent State. His senior year, he was throwing in the NCAA championships. He had a couple of fouls. He was definitely on the left side, so the left side. He said the wind was blowing in their territory. He said his releases were good. He said he was talking to officials before telling them off. He was like, no, that's runner up in the nation, but still, he's senior at Kent State. He's training at the 2 seasons. Weird. They do like the shooting, and then when it's running and shooting, it's not like a skiing and shooting. They ride horses, offense, and then swimming. He was a swimmer at the university school. Yeah, he was a double podium, state podium finisher at his senior year. He was bad with like that's the band that the beat is. I guess the beats meat spoils, except if it's not that many, punching has too many preservatives, it might just last longer than
All right.
But if it's like a hamburger or like
Well, all right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the band there. It's halftime from Kenston. Kenston played. They played a montage of Sticks, which is always a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. Dennis Manoloff rejoining your truly Dave DeNatale here
Just
in the
out
booth.
there listening to the band. Tremendous job.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. That was fun. What was fun for Kenston here, and not so much fun for Chagrin Falls in the first half, was Kenston's ability just to do anything they wanted to do offensively, and really scored on all but one possession when they had the football in the first half. And I mean, it was pick your poison time between Tom Kupsick, 3 touchdown passes, Jack Porter, 2 touchdown runs. The next thing you know, it's 41-0.
It starts with the quarterback. Tom Kupsick knows what he's doing. He's poised back there. He's big and strong. He can make the throws. And then you've got skill position players who are elusive, fast, physical when they need to be. Kenston just put on a show. Kenston, I'm sure, would say they weren't up to snuff.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree.
Of the penalties and some of the missteps and the snaps, but for a team that might not have been clicking on all cylinders, it certainly looked fantastic at 41.
What is amazing to me, I mean, you've been keeping a running total of this. If you think about going back to late November, early December, I can't even remember the exact date it was, but the state championship game, after an early touchdown by Kettering Alter, Kenston scored 42 unanswered points, won that game. They scored 35-0 last week against Black River. It's 41-0 here tonight as we get ready to start the third quarter.
It's 118 by my count.
118-0 run. That's pretty staggering. I mean,
dating to last year
yeah,
too, because of the state championship game.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. You sit there and you go, wow, this team is on some kind of run, some kind of a stretch right now, and they're playing just an amazing level of football. So that's the Kenston side. Yeah. Now you look at this Chagrin Falls team. They had a tough one last week against Streetsboro. They're on the trailing end of a 41-0 score. I mean, now you got to look at still competing, but try to win this half. Get some points on the board. Get some things that you can feel better about yourselves with as this season goes. It's not going to be like this every week. This is a team that, they've got some talent. You're going to have guys that are going to be able to help you win. But it starts now.
Yeah, and Dino, we see over there on the far sideline where Chagrin Falls is, the guys are jumping around, they're into it. It's just they've been overmatched to this point. No quit, though. No quit in Chagrin Falls. They played hard. They've just been outplayed.
Yes.
And what are you going to do in that situation? But as you say, try to get a first down, try to get a drive going, try to score points. The question is, on both sides of it, when does Kenston sub out? When do they move guys out and rest their starters? On the other side, does Chagrin Falls run starters out there when it's, if it's 50-0 or 48-0 or something to that effect? So it'll be worth watching the personnel changes that may or may not be made in the second half.
I can't imagine, and by the way, Kenston will have the football first, that we'll see much of Tom Kupsick, Porter and company, maybe a drive or so. I can't imagine much more than that.
Yeah, you're right. If this drive goes the way they plan it to and they score, then that probably would be the end of Tom Kupsick's.
Yeah. I think we'll see a lot of Nico Giorgio in the second half. He's a freshman quarterback that they've enjoyed kind of watching him. He was 4 for 5 throwing last week against Black River. I would think he'll get some opportunities. Stanley Sell will get an opportunity to run the football a little bit tonight. But that is to come. First and foremost, though, Chagrin Falls will kick it off.
Yeah, the regulars will be out there for both teams.
Yeah, Mintz and Middleton are back deep to receive. So, Everything is still status quo for the moment. 41-0 Kenston as we begin the second half. Tyler Mintz will make the catch at the 9-yard line. Goes forward to the 15-20 with a hold to the 30. He's to the 40, and I think it was the kicker. It was Lucas Gazutis made a touchdown-saving tackle at about the 41-yard line.
Gazutis came to play too. You know, he's out there batting. He's balling, and if he doesn't make the tackle. We're talking about a touchdown.
You saw it right about when Tyler got to about the 20 to 25-yard line. I heard you go, like, whoa. It's like, the sea was starting to part there for Tyler Mintz, and a terrific return. He takes it out to the 43-yard line. Tom Kupsick for the moment and Porter are out there. Jack Porter with a couple of touchdown runs in the first half. As we mentioned, Tom Kupsick had 3 touchdown passes to 3 different receivers, I might add. Mintz in motion. He'll get it on the jet sweep on first down to the 45. And he'll take it out to the 49, very close to midfield to the 50-yard line. Cam Owen there on the stop. It'll be a gain of 7, 2nd and 3.
Yeah, good job by Jack Porter. Kind of an occupy block just to make sure that the room was clear on the jet sweep. And that set up the ability to gain a nice chunk.
Porter will stand to Tom Kupsick's left. He'll actually spot it at the 49, so make it 2nd and 4. Mintz in motion right to left. And on the counter, here's Porter at the 50. First down to the 45. He's to the 40. 35. Cuts inside to the 30. And Porter will be put down at the 27-yard line. That's a gain of 24 yards for Jack Porter and a first down.
This was well-executed play all around. And everybody was doing what they were supposed to do.
Let's see. You ready for some scores here? Well, we'll get into here in a moment. A lot of scores coming through here, including
not good news out of Serpentini Stadium for those of us who follow North Royalton.
No. They're playing Brunswick tonight, aren't they? As a keeper by John Tom Kupsick at the 25-20.
What a cutback.
Inside the 15, and John will be put down at about the 13-yard line. He gets 14 more. And another first down. St. Ignatius leading Menor 21-17 at the half. Perry in front of Chardon. How about this? 31-7 Perry. That's now in the third quarter. That offense is explosive too. Perry Pirates. Shotgun, Tom Kupsick gives the ball. Porter at the 10. Flag down at the 5-yard line.
That'll come back.
It was a nice tackle as they put him down there by Paul Fireman, the cornerback.
Pretty sure I saw the hold. I don't want to identify the guy and be yelled at for being incorrect.
No, nobody.
I saw what looked like a hold.
It is a hold. At the half, how about this? Kirtland leading Riverside 8-0. Thought we might see more points in that game. Wadsworth, after a slow start, now they lead Worcester 13-10 at the half. Valley Forge ahead of Rocky River. That game being played at Rocky River, 17-7 at the half. And the Massillon Tigers shutting out Glen Oak 34-0 in the second. Yeah, I just saw that. North Royalton scored. Tough night for the Bears. Although I got to tell you, I think the Brunswick Blue Devils, after they may be onto something here. I think they're playing a lot better these first 2 weeks. Shotgun for Tom Kupsick, gives the ball to Porter after the penalty. Inside the 20, breaks a tackle, 15 inside the 10, and Porter finally tackled down at the 6-yard line. He gets 17 yards on a 1st and 20.
It's a broken record with him. He gets hit, he stays on his feet. He spins, he stays on his feet.
You said it, center of gravity.
Yeah, he keeps it low, and he's fast, too. He's fast and quick, but he doesn't go down initially. And that's, one of the signs of a great back.
Clock not stopping with the 41-0 lead. We're under 8 minutes to go here in the third quarter. From the left hash, 2nd and 3. Mintz in motion. Tom Kupsick keeps, runs right side. At the 5, got tripped up. Took it down to the 2 to the 1. And he's in for the touchdown. Come on, man. Unbelievable. Tom Kupsick. A brilliant 6-yard touchdown run.
I don't even know if that was supposed to happen. I think he wanted to hand that ball off.
I think he did too.
And it was like a semi-busted play. And then he rolls right, and he's bouncing off of guys and continuing to move, and he gets through and into the end zone. Tremendous individual effort. This guy is, he's all world.
3 touchdown passes and a touchdown run tonight for Tom Kupsick. He has 6 touchdown passes and 2 TD runs thus far. Extra point for Torres. That one is up. That one is good. 48-0 Bombers. 7:38 to play in the third quarter.
Any coincidence that the first snap on the extra point coming out of halftime was perfect?
Yes, I think they talked about
not.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that was emphasized quite a bit.
You guys are going to get this right. now you get into a 48-0 continuous clock. I'll be surprised if we see any more of Tom Cuffsick tonight.
And the way his teammates are coming over, and I think Jeff Grubich just said, "Yeah, you're done for the night." And Logan Vargo, one of the other co-captains, went over to see him. I think John's done for the night.
He can put the baseball cap on if he's got one.
Yeah.
Because what a performance by the young fella.
Is he something?
2.5 quarters and just, ripping the ball all over the place. And when he runs, he hits people. He's physical.
Here's what I love. Jeff Grubich just tells him his night's over. Tom Cuffsick sprints over from one side of the bench to the other as Nico Giorgio, the freshman, is warming up. And went over, said something to the freshman. Like, hey, go get him out there. Or
he's warming them up, too.
I mean,
this is, the sign of a good team.
Yep.
They're all together. And it's a tough night. On the other side, it's a tough night for Chagrin Falls.
As Torres'
what are you
kick, will be caught by Perez at the 7-yard line. Perez will make a move inside at the 20, and he'll be put down at about the 21-yard line. And the Tigers will start there with 7:15 to play. And again, once the ball is snapped here, we go back to the running clock. Mark-I Marino is in his 25th year as the head coach of Chagrin Falls. 175 wins, 92 losses, a couple of trips to the state championship game, as we mentioned. It's interesting, and I hadn't realized this. One of the things that and some schools on this part of the Northeast Ohio have lacrosse as a fall sport, and I didn't realize this on first down. The ball will go, I believe it's not Perez. That's Cam O'Connor getting the run, and he'll take it out to the 29-yard line, a gain of about 8. Some of the players who normally would come out and play football for Chagrin Falls over the last few years, they're playing in fall now. They're playing lacrosse. And that's kind of affected the numbers. It's not, you don't have as many, you have more players that have to play both ways now. And it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's an interesting little sidebar.
Yes, it is. It's unfortunate for the football team, but the lacrosse team says, hey, we'll take it.
Yeah. Pierce throws, and Perez makes a nice catch at the 35-yard line on his knees, and that'll be a first down as Alex Castro over there on the coverage. First down pickup on the pass from Pierce to Perez. And that's a combination that's going to be called a lot this year. Xavier Perez will get a lot of touches a lot more times the rest of the season. It's going to go under 6 minutes to play here in quarter number 3. Ball at the right hash at the 35-yard line. Dawson Pierce gets the snap, gives to O'Connor, and O'Connor got right to the 35 and ran right into Connor Kratzer, the defensive tackle.
Kratzer was just right there. He's been terrific all game.
Dombrowski, Kratzer, Check, and Maddie are all seniors. Kratzer, Check, and Maddie are all returning starters from last year's state title team. And then when you mention that, and then you add the fact that Valachi's a returning starter on defense, Vargo's a returning starter, Mintz is a returning starter. You have 8 of your 11, or 7 of your 11 returning starters. It makes the coach's job a lot easier as that pass from Pierce, incomplete, trying to throw it over on the left side to Will Richmond. And that will set up a third down at about 9.
Yeah, that's a bad miss. He was open. Not that it would have been a first down, but you got to hit that throw. It's a basic outcut. Come the bells.
Yep, third down and about 9. We go under 5 minutes to play here in quarter number 3. 48-0 Kenston over Chagrin Falls. Dave DeNatale and the D-man, Dennis Manoloff. Here at Kenston Bomber Stadium. Beautiful facility and a beautiful night here in Geauga County. Back to throw Pierce on third down, and the pass almost intercepted by Castro. Threw it into double coverage, intended for Perez. Malachi and Castro were over double covering.
And that's a case where Kenston's defense knew exactly where that ball was going. They're like, we know it's going to the X-Man, so we're going to swarm. And, I'm not going to say it was telegraphed, but Kenston just
fairly
knew
close to being
that
so.
Perez was the guy who was going to get the ball, and they were right there.
Kazunas will punt again to Mintz and Middleton. Double safeties at their own 30, and it's a good high driving kick inside the 15, inside the 10, and it's going to be down at the 9-yard line. That's a heck of a punt by Lucas Kazunas.
Here comes the substitution that we talked about at quarterback.
Now,
Troy Aikman is coming in.
Yeah, Troy
for the Cowboys.
Yeah, so a freshman quarterback, Nico Giorgio, will get his second consecutive week of some varsity action. Again, he played last week for a spell against Black River, threw 4 or 5 passes for 66 yards. So partnering means I need to get my roster out here. I saw Jack Porter run to the huddle, but I don't think he's going to. No, he's not. It's going to be
like wholesale changes on the skill position side.
Stanley Sell now at running back. Yeah, let's see. I think Colin McCleary now in one of the wide receivers.
The behemoth left tackle, Mr. Sell, is taking a seat.
Yeah,
I can tell because the moon isn't blocked out. I mean, when he's not in the game.
Stanley Sell will get the carry on first down. And got a nice round of applause from, I think, some of his family members down to our right. But he actually lost the yard on the play. It'll be second down and 11. Sell got some reps last year at running back, mostly as Jack Porter, who did the damage for the Bombers. But he's a junior, 5'11", 200 pounds.
Checking the wristband. The youngsters, his heart's got to be beating a mile a minute right now.
Yeah, his first home game as a quarterback for the Kenston Bombers on varsity night here. Second down and about 11. Giorgio will again give to Sell. This time he's got some room across the 15. And he'll take it out to the 16-yard line to give Stanley about 7 yards on that pickup. And it'll set up about a third down and 3. But, for the Bomber fans, you want to know what things are going to look like next year. You're getting a little preview of it right now.
Yeah, and you wonder how many times he's going to throw the ball. Probably very few. I mean, so you won't necessarily get to see that. Although here they're in shotgun, I still think they're going to hand the ball off out of the shotgun here.
If it's not a run to Sell, you may see a jet sweep here. 3rd and 3 from the 16-yard line. Nico Giorgio, the freshman quarterback. Relief of John Tomkupsik, who was brilliant again tonight. And it will be Sell getting the carry, and he'll be brought down by Tommy Conway, a sophomore nose tackle behind the line of scrimmage back at about the 14-yard line. And will they bring Tom Kupsik into punt? I don't think so. I think there'll be a different punter.
Yeah,
John's night is truly over.
In that play, Chagrin Falls smelled a quarterback or a draw. They
were like you. They knew.
They figured it was going to be a run, and they were right there.
Your punter is Tyler Kostranik, senior.
Unenviable task. I believe he's kicking into the wind here. It's not going to be easy. I can't see any flags moving. Oh, well, there it is. It's not much. Too bad, but it is in his face.
1 minute to go in the third quarter. Richmond in single safety at the Kenston 46. Kostranik's kick is short,
dear.
Off the side of his foot at the 25. Got a favorable roll to the 30, and that's where it's going to be down. So only about a 15-yard punt. And it'll be 1st and 10 for the Chagrin Falls Tigers at the 30-yard line. You don't have to worry about it's backup punter. Not too many things you have to worry about for Jeff Rubich, but Kostranik will want to get that one back.
Yeah, that was not the best punt in the world. And here's the thing now. If you're Kenston, your defense is saying, all right, we don't want him to score.
No.
Period. And they're not kicking a field goal. I mean, I would be stunned if Chagrin Falls kicked the field goal just to get points.
You've got a few of the ones, by the way, still in there.
You just got to keep them out of the end zone if you're Kenston because you want to stop. Look
out.
And a
fumble.
Ball's out.
And And I think Kenston might have pounced on it at the 35-yard line. They did.
That's just a butchered exchange there, Dino.
Yeah, it looked like between you had Perez, you had the quarterback, Dawson Pearson, McClintock, and a busted exchange. Ball pops loose on the field turf and recovered by the Bombers, and I think it was Connor Kratzer who recovered it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate for Chagrin Falls, but that's a mistake that they can't make.
Right.
You just can't make a mistake like that.
Well, you sit there and anything go right for us tonight. So the Bombers get the football back. The third quarter clock is about to expire. We're down to 10 seconds to go, and Giorgio has no interest in getting the snap here before we start the fourth quarter.
I truly don't mean this as any disrespect to Chagrin Falls, but it's amazing how fast a quarter goes when this continuous clock. I mean,
it flies.
I guess it goes without saying, but I just said it. It goes.
So 3 quarters in the books here at Kenston Bomber Stadium. It's 48-0. Kenston leading Chagrin Falls. John Tom Kufsick tonight with 3 touchdown passes, 1 to Mintz, 1 to Middleton, 1 to Miller. It's like a law firm. Tom Kufsick ran for a touchdown. Jack Porter ran for 2 touchdowns. And Jay Middleton ran for a score.
And listen, I'm saying this very truthfully. I'm sure Chagrin Falls does a nice job with its personnel, and I'm sure its coaching staff does a nice job. I'm simply saying we have the Kenston sideline in front of us, the closest to us, and we can see the interaction between the players and the coaches. And you just love the way this coaching staff goes about its business, and talking to guys and not doing it in a crazy way.
Yeah.
They're clinical in how they do it, and these guys are so well coached, and it's no wonder they are a well-oiled machine coming off that state championship last year.
They're well coached. Is Sweet Caroline you can hear playing.
I'm not sure what's going on here.
I mean, man, at Fenway Park, all of a sudden, we're back to action.
Stop the music. There's your first throw, Dino.
Nico Giorgio's pass is incomplete over on the left side. Was looking for David Clausen, a fellow freshman, and who's the backup tight end at the 35-yard line. And I think Jeff Grubich would also say, in addition to his staff, it's a great coaching staff, the fact he's got a leadership group, Tom Kufsick, captain, Mintz, captain, Porter, captain, George Sell, captain, Fargo, captain. It's a leadership group for guys that were really so instrumental last year. As Giorgio, that time completes the pass. Stanley Sell has it at the
heck of a tackle
37-yard line. Yeah, it was a big-time stick there.
McClintock with the, he hit him hard.
Love to see that he's still competing out there.
Yeah, I mean, I have no question about Chagrin Falls' compete level.
Yeah, the heart and desire.
Yeah, they're fighting. They're trying their darndest. Nobody's mailing it in out there. They've got some guys that fly to the football for sure. It's just one team is considerably better than the other team. There's no fluke about 48-0.
There was a stop. There was Jeff Grubich just called a timeout here with on a 3rd down and 8. So you've got 2 left here with 10:30 to go. But as we mentioned, you can vote at WKYC.com starting on Monday around noon or so. 3 games. We pick. You get to pick where we're headed, and D-Man and I will then greet you somewhere next Friday night. I can tell you what the nominees are. 2 of the 3 nominees, but I don't know if everybody be surprised. I'll tell you. One I know for sure. Twinsburg at Aurora. I'll give you another one in a minute. By the way, Memorial Stadium at Aurora, Veterans Stadium at Aurora is one of the nicest stadiums, and they feed you. Yes. They that's one of the best facilities ever. Paul Powers and his great staff over there, they treat you well. So yeah, not that it matters for us.
No,
we don't. D-Man and I don't have say in this. You're the people out there getting to vote, but just saying, if we end up at Aurora, they do feed you.
Well, I'm sure that it's first class at Aurora, and just as first class here. I mean, the people at Kenston are just marvelous. Everything about this Friday night football experience over here has been 5-star.
Yeah, it's top to bottom. This is a first-class facility here. As out of the timeout, it's 3rd down and 8. Fake to sell. And here comes Giorgio to throw. Looking deep.
Oh, he got
Pass
him.
is caught at
my.
the 40, at the 35, and out of bounds at the 32. Carson Rivers-Gabo with a terrific catch. I don't know how the heck that Nico Giorgio got that throw. Unbelievable.
What a throw by Nico. On the run, he's being chased by a couple of monsters to the right sideline and puts it on a dime, puts it right there.
1st and 10 at the 32, getting valuable time here with this offense. For Carson Rivers-Gabo, that is his 3rd catch of the season. 6 foot, 175 pounds. He's only a sophomore. High snap pulled down. It's Stanley Sell on the carry.
Nice cutback.
Inside the 26, down to the 25-yard line. Got about 6 on that pickup. A nice bit of running there from Stanley Sell, as you mentioned.
That's a quality cutback. He read it right away, and that allowed him to gain an additional 5.
After the game, D-Man and I will head on the field, talk to Coach Grubich. We'll grab Tom Kupsik as well. Get their thoughts on tonight's victory here. Kenston 48-0 over Chagrin Falls with 9 minutes on the continuing clock here in this 4th quarter. Nico Giorgio to throw, fires one left side, pass caught at the 20, and that'll be a 1st down right at the 20-yard line. David Clausen, again, the freshman tight end, on the catch. And it's another 1st down for this Bombers' second-team offense, getting some valuable reps here in the 4th quarter. Let's see a new Joseph Martin will check in at running back. So you have Martin in, and they'll keep both Martin and Sell into the game. Sell will actually go out on a slot left side. Nico Giorgio, fun watching him, the freshman, get some playing time here at home on varsity. Down to 8 minutes to play here in the 4th quarter. It's a 1st and 10 from the 20-yard line of Chagrin Falls. On the delay, Martin with the carry, head of steam, had a big hole there inside the 15 and took it down near the 11. First time we've seen Joseph Martin, a senior back. Nice bit of running there. 2nd and 1 for the Bombers.
Nico leading a potential touchdown drive here.
And let me tell you, if they get a score here, you'll see as excited Tom Kupsik and the rest of the captains and the seniors who are over on the sidelines. They'll be as excited as they'll get probably all year long.
I want to see a quarterback draw, Dino.
Giorgio.
Draw by Giorgio.
2nd and 1. They'll give on a delay. Here's Martin to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and he's in.
Yeah.
As the D-man says, touchdown for the senior back.
I didn't mean to jump you there, but you can see the hole. It's so open. Wow.
And folks, I got to tell you, just watching guys like Fargo and a lot of these seniors, Sell running in there. I mean, absolutely elated to see a senior get an opportunity, coming in as a backup, Joseph Martin, to get a touchdown run there.
Martin looked terrific in that drive. It just, what does it say? It talks about the depth that Kenston has.
It's the quantity and the quality.
They're really excited for the young man.
You knew they would be.
He's jacked up.
Yeah, you knew they
Why
would be.
not?
It's the way it's the way this program is.
Yeah, it's great to see the enthusiasm. All for one. It can be sometimes a cliche, but it's true with these guys. They're all supporting each other.
Over on the far side, there was a stoppage. There was an injured Chagrin Falls Tiger who's up off the field under his own power. Bruising night here for Chagrin Falls. I think that was Adam Monday, the linebacker. He's shaken up, and he's off the field now, and he's okay.
On for the extra point attempt for the Bombers.
As well, a new kicker for the extra point. Parker Monday get an opportunity to kick here off the hold of Jonathan Abarno. So Jonathan still in there. But for a freshman, Parker Monday, he'll get his first opportunity in varsity action. Try to punch in an extra point. Good snap, a little high. The hold is down. The kick is up, and it is good. And the freshman gets himself picked up by one of his own teammates. Logan Vargo.
See, this is
That's
the
what
thing.
I love right there.
This-
Senior
Yeah.
grabbing the freshman right
And
there.
here's what Kenston is doing. Okay, they're dominating the game. They're getting all their guys in, but they're doing it with class.
Yes.
They're having fun. They're celebrating amongst themselves, but none of it is over the top. None of it's any of this poor sportsmanship stuff. It's all within the boundaries of good sportsmanship. And, you'd like to see that. Because at 55-0, it would be easy to, do something goofy. But Kenston doesn't do it that way. They win with class.
Ignatius,
they dominate with class.
Ignatius over Menor in the third quarter now, 31-17.
Wow.
Also
Chico.
Also in the fourth quarter. That's up at Osborne Stadium, no less. Perry leading Chardon 31-15. That's now in the fourth quarter. Kirtland shutting out Riverside 14-0 in the third. Remember, a lot of these games are still early because we're on the turning clock here. Maslin leading Glen 55-6. That's a third quarter score now, I believe. Aurora over CBCA 14-7 in the third quarter. And Wadsworth leading Worcester in the third 13-10. Thank you there to Tyler Carey. Kickoff caught by Will Richmond. Down to the 10. Kind of stutter steps and spins around at the 15 and goes forward to the 16-yard line and put down there with 6:52 to play. Here in this football game, 55-0, Kenston Bombers in the lead.
Any of those scores surprise you, Dino?
Honestly, looking back at it, not really.
Not even Chico being up on.
Yeah, I thought that would be closer. I mean, Menor played so well last week against St. Edward in a game that was really helped to be defined by a safety, 29-28. But the rest of them, not really. Kirtland is picking up right where they left off. That's a Kirtland. They were Division 6 last year. Now they're up to Division 5, but they're playing a Division 2 team tonight, and their defense doing the job against a very good Riverside offense.
New
On first down, we
quarterback,
got a new quarterback and a new running back in there reversing his field at the 16-yard line and being brought down there. We'll bust out the rosters here.
Try the option pitch. Looks like Cameron Owen, the quarterback.
So moving over from the defensive side, now getting some reps offensively here. Owen, the 5'8 senior, and he starts at cornerback on the defensive side. Perez is still in there, and Richmond is still in there as well. They have a new running back in there, and that new back is Bryson Blair, a sophomore. No gain by Blair on first down. On second down, Owen will throw to the right side. Pass is caught at the 23-yard line, out near the 24. Lucas Gazudis makes that catch and gets knocked out of bounds.
Gazudis is a player.
Yes.
He's out there, as we said, he's battling.
I don't think he takes a play off between kicking, punting, playing linebacker on defense, and then wide receiver on offense.
There's a lot to like about it.
As we approach 5 minutes to play here in the fourth quarter.
I mean, how much do you love to play football if you're Chagrin Falls? You're going to find that out. You'll find that out about these guys. When you're down 55-0, how much do you love the game?
Owen's pass complete on the left side. That's Richmond with a nice rolling catch for a first down at the 29-yard line. Over on coverage for the Bombers, Michael Payton getting some playing time. And a first down for the Tigers with 4:50 and counting to go here in the fourth quarter. Kenston looking to pitch a shutout for the second consecutive week to start this season. And that run since the first quarter against Kettering Alter continues.
I've got it at 132.
As this time it'll be Bryson Blair getting the carry.
Hit.
And
Let's
huge.
sort out the pile to find him. Who was it?
Michael Payton was one of them.
I've got Mr. Klusner with a nice finish there, a nice exclamation.
1 yard pickup for Blair.
Connor Klusner. Very nice work. Yeah, it's a staggering run here, as you say, Dino. You termed it correctly. 132-point run for Kenston.
And they show no signs of being a team that's lost their hunger. There's no championship.
No complacency.
There's no championship hangover. No complacency. And it looked like a
fumblerooski.
They're trying to snap it to to a different guy in the backfield, but Kenston was able to blow it up. They snapped it to Drew Zimmer, I think, to their H-back.
So you think that was planned? Yeah, it looked for a second like it was a botched play, and then but the guy who ran it looked like he knew what he was doing. So
It's
a modified fumble Ruski, perhaps.
Yeah, a loss of a yard on the play though. It'll be 3rd down and 12. 3 minutes to go, 4th quarter. Bryson Blair will move to the left of new quarterback Cam Owen. 2 receivers to the right, 1 to the left. 3rd and 12. Owen throws, caught. Perez has it to 32, reverses his field, now steps forward to the 35-yard line and put down there. Again at 7.
Good job,
4th and 5.
Good job by Perez to get a couple extra yards. You know, what's happened with him, though, is every time he gets the ball, he turns around and there's 3 guys in his face.
The speed of Kenston's defense just will not allow him to break away. I got to tell you, though, I kind of like the way Cam Owen throws the football, and it's nothing against Pierce, but I would. I'm not telling Mark Armorino how to do offense. He knows a heck of a lot more than I do. But I wouldn't mind seeing it where you have Pierce maybe as your running back and have Owen do some passing. I like the way Owen throws the football.
Yeah, Pierce started out all right, and then he started to be inaccurate high. That's a good ball to the outside.
Oh, it ripped away. Ball was picked up by Kenston at the 30, 20, 15, to the 10 and out of bounds at the 8-yard line goes Lucas Simmons. Comes away with the strips as he took it away from Will Richmond. And Logan Vargo is somewhere going, that was supposed to be me.
Yes.
1st and goal for the Kenston Bombers on a terrific play by freshman Lucas Simmons.
Yeah. Vargo had been looking for that all game, and he'd been late with the whistle. And now,
Vargo was one of the first to go find Simmons.
Yeah, I wonder. Okay, that was a huge hit to knock Simmons out of bounds. I wonder if the Kenston sideline thought that was a little extracurricular.
I wonder if they did too. But
I'll keep the name out of it because I don't want to, have a guy be guilty of something that wasn't called. But you wonder. It
was borderline. Let's put it that way.
I thought it was a good football play, but who knows?
1st and goal at the 7 with 1:40 as the clock starts up again. Jack Porter's in the game. They're going to go with a couple of backs in the backfield. Sell and Porter. And they're just going to go to a knee. Okay.
That's class.
Okay.
Very classy.
Yeah, I was wondering if Porter was in there, but he's in there a lot of times in the victory formation. So Nico Giorgio goes to a knee, and they realize now with the way the clock is, and now Porter will come out of the game, that they can go ahead to the victory formation.
The shotgun victory formation is something that threw us off a little bit, Dino. Not used to that.
Yeah, usually you'll see Porter go 10 yards behind Tom Kufsick or whoever your quarterback is, and now it's not Porter, it's a different back, but now they'll go to the formation here as the clock runs 52 seconds, 51 seconds. Again, D-Man and I will head to the field afterwards, and we'll hear from John Tom Kufsick and Jeff Grubich. We will post those interviews for you on Twitter, and you'll be able to see those at our WKYC.com page. The 2 of us will be back with you next week. By the way, the other, the second nominee, I teased it, Wycliffe at Orange. Good small school game from Division 5.
That's a wrap, Dino.
That will do it. Kenston does not have to run another play. And the Bombers go to 2-0. They win their home opener in absolutely dominating fashion. They beat Chagrin Falls tonight in the final. The Kenston Bombers 55 and the Chagrin Falls Tigers nothing. That will do it here at Kenston Bombers Stadium. D-Man and I, again, will be back with you on the field as we'll talk to a couple of the Bombers, and then we'll see you next week. Partner?
A lot of fun, Dino.
A lot of fun. And we thank you for watching, everybody, tonight. Again, a presentation at WKYC.com. Vote starting on Monday for week number 3. I'm Dave DeNatale for Dennis Manoloff. Thanks for watching. One more time, your final. Kenston Bombers 55 and the Chagrin Falls Tigers nothing. Thanks for watching, everyone.